My name is Eleanor, and I'm 60 now. Sometimes, it feels like I've lived a lifetime. Other times, it feels like it was just yesterday that I held my son, John, in my arms for the very first time. When I look back, all I can see is the love I gave him. But the truth is, I don't know if that love ever really reached him, or if he even understood it. I gave everything to him, but in the end, I'm left with nothing but regret. John was born when I was young, just 24 years old. I remember the first time I held him in my arms. He was so small, so fragile, and yet so perfect. I looked at him and promised myself that I would do everything in my power to make sure he had the best life possible. His father and I were young, full of dreams, but life has a way of throwing obstacles in your path. My husband, John's father, passed away when John was only 5. And from that moment on, it was just me and him. I had never thought much about being a single mother. I was scared, of course, but I knew I had no choice. I had to take care of him. So, I threw myself into my work. I worked long hours, sometimes even late into the night. I stayed up sewing his clothes, making sure he had the best food I could afford, and making sure he had all the things a young boy should have. But it wasn't just about providing for him, it was about giving him something I never had, a full and happy childhood. I remember the nights when I would lay awake, watching him sleep. He was always such a peaceful child, a quiet boy who seemed to live in his own world. I would touch his little hand, marveling at how perfect he was, and think to myself, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything, John. I'll be here for you. I'll always be here. And I was. For every scraped knee, every broken heart, every failed test, I was there. When he needed advice, I was there. When he needed encouragement, I was there. I helped him with his homework, read him bedtime stories, cooked him dinner every night, and did everything I could to make him feel loved and protected. I gave up my own dreams, my own desires, because I believed it was all worth it. I believed that one day, when he was older, he would understand the sacrifices I made. I thought that when he grew up, he would be strong, kind, and responsible. I envisioned a day when I would see him graduate, maybe marry, and have children of his own. I imagined him coming to me and thanking me for everything I had done for him. I imagined him saying, "Mom, you gave me everything I needed to succeed in life. I love you." But now, as I sit here alone in this empty house, I can't help but wonder, did I do enough? Did he ever understand? John left for college when he was 18. I remember packing his things, helping him fold clothes, trying to hold back tears as I realized that this was the first step toward him leaving home. I wanted him to go, of course. It's what every mother wants for their child, for them to go out into the world and make a name for themselves. But as I kissed him goodbye and watched him drive off, my heart broke. I thought about the years that lay ahead, the years where he would be out there on his own. I told myself that I would always be here for him, even if he was far away. "You're going to do great things, John," I told him, wiping away my tears. "Just remember to call me sometimes, okay?" I tried to smile, but I couldn't hide the ache in my chest. At first, he called me every few days. "Hi, Mom, just checking in. How are you?" He'd ask, and I'd feel so relieved to hear his voice. But slowly, the calls became less frequent. I didn't mind at first. He was busy. He was in college now. But as time went on, those calls became more and more rare. The holidays came and went, and he wasn't there. "Mom, I'm really busy. I'll try to come home during spring break," he said the first time I asked him to come visit. He didn't come. And that was the beginning of what I can only describe as a slow drift. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't like he stopped loving me overnight. It was just the distance that grew between us, an invisible gap that seemed to widen with each passing day. I would see him occasionally during the holidays, but even those visits felt distant. He was always on his phone, always preoccupied with his friends, and I was left to sit on the sidelines, watching as my son became someone I no longer knew. He started getting busy with his studies and his social life. That's how it goes, right? He was finding his way. And that's what I wanted for him. But there was always a part of me, deep down, that missed the closeness we once shared. I missed the times when he would talk to me about his day, when he would ask for my opinion on things, when he would just want to be with me. But now, it felt like I was becoming a background character in his life. He had his friends, his own world, and I was just a phone call away, a text away, but never really present. I told myself I would be okay. He was growing up. This was natural. But the pain, the loneliness, it kept creeping in. Every time I saw a mother and son together, laughing, talking, I couldn't help but think of what we had lost. But I kept pushing those thoughts away. After all, I still had him, didn't I? He still called me sometimes. He still came home on holidays. But the truth is, as time passed, I felt like I was losing him, piece by piece. And I didn't know how to stop it. I always believed that distance was just a natural part of life. After all, John had to grow up, and growing up meant becoming independent, finding his own way in the world. I never thought it would hurt this much. When John left for college at 18, I remember standing at the door, watching him load his things into the car, trying not to show how hard it was to let go. He was my only child, and I had spent every day of his life trying to give him everything he needed. I wanted to believe that he was ready for the world, but as I watched him drive away, a piece of me stayed behind, caught in the silence that followed him. In the beginning, everything seemed fine. He called me every couple of days, nothing too long, just checking in. "Hey, Mom, how's everything?" his voice would say on the other end of the line. I'd ask how he was, how college was, if he was making friends. It was nice to hear his voice. It was the same, yet somehow different. But as the months went on, the calls became less frequent. I didn't think too much of it at first. He was busy, after all. College was hard. I understood. But slowly, I noticed the distance growing, and it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, too. His calls, once so frequent and filled with chatter, started to become short and sparse. "Mom, I'm really busy. I'll call you later." The next call might come days later, with a few brief words before he'd hang up, leaving me staring at the phone, wondering if he would ever call me back again. It wasn't that he didn't love me, at least, I tried to tell myself that, but with each passing day, I began to feel like I was fading from his life. I wasn't the center of his world anymore. The world around him was becoming bigger, and I was being pushed to the edges. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I began to realize just how much he had changed. I had always looked forward to the holidays, to cooking his favorite dishes, setting a place for him at the table. But that year, John didn't come home. He called me, his voice distant and apologetic. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't make it home this year. I've got a ton of stuff to do. I'll be back at Christmas, okay?" I smiled as best as I could. "Of course, sweetheart. I understand. I'll save you some pie." The truth was, I felt empty inside. I didn't want to make him feel guilty, so I let it go. I pretended I wasn't hurt. But I ate alone that night, the food tasting like ash in my mouth. I remembered the days when he was a boy, how he would run around the house, laughing, his energy filling the air. Now, it was just me and the silence. The holidays passed, and so did the calls. They became fewer, and when they did come, it was always about something he needed. Rent money. Food money. Money for textbooks. I didn't hesitate. I sent it. I thought to myself, he's my son. Of course I'll help him. I can't say no. But with each request, I felt something in my chest grow heavier. It wasn't that I minded helping him, he was my son, after all. But it felt like that was the only reason he was calling me. Money. I was just a source of cash, and nothing more. The first time I felt truly used, it hit me like a cold slap. I had just transferred a significant amount of money to him, and then he casually mentioned that he wouldn't be coming home for the next holiday either. "I'm sorry, Mom, but I've got things to do," he said. I sat there, the phone still pressed to my ear, and for the first time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the lack of visits or the fact that he was too busy. It was the way he had started to treat me, like a convenience, like a tool he used when he needed something. I wasn't the mother he used to talk to, share his thoughts with, confide in. I was just a bank account. It wasn't long before I noticed the pattern. The calls came only when he needed money. And even then, they were brief, detached. "Mom, I need some money to pay rent. Things are tight this month." I didn't think twice. I transferred the money, but with each transaction, a little more of me died inside. The love I had for him was real, but it felt like I was the only one putting in any effort. I was always there when he needed something, but when I needed him, he was nowhere to be found. I started to feel a deep sense of loneliness. When he wasn't asking for money, he didn't seem to want anything to do with me. The holidays came and went, and he stayed away. The calls became fewer, and when they did come, they were always brief and always about what he needed. But I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know how to make him see what was happening. I couldn't bear to be the mother who pushed him away, who demanded more from him than he was willing to give. So, I continued to give. The truth was, I didn't know how to say no to him. Every time he asked for money, I told myself it was just a temporary thing. He was just figuring things out. He was my son, and he needed me. But somewhere inside, I knew that I wasn't the mother I used to be to him. And as much as I tried to convince myself that this was just a phase, that things would go back to how they used to be, I knew deep down that they wouldn't. I was losing him. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. As the months went by, the calls from John became less frequent, and when they did come, it was always for one thing. It wasn't for a conversation about his life or how I was doing. It wasn't to check in on me or share a memory. It was always the same. "Mom, I need money for rent." Or, "Mom, can you send me some money for groceries?" At first, I didn't mind. I wanted to help him. He was my son. I had spent years raising him, loving him, doing everything I could to ensure he had everything he needed. I would send the money with a smile, telling myself that this was just a phase, that he would grow out of needing me so much. I had done everything for him his whole life, helped with school projects, stayed up late talking to him about his hopes and dreams, and now, he was calling, asking for money. It was only after the third or fourth time that it started to wear on me. Each time I sent money, I told myself it was just temporary. He was in college, things were difficult. I had been there, I understood. But then, the calls became more frequent, the requests more urgent. "Mom, I need money for my phone bill," or "Mom, I can't pay the rent this month." And still, I gave. It was my job as his mother, wasn't it? But then it hit me, the only time John seemed to reach out was when he needed something. He wasn't calling to tell me about his day, to ask how I was doing. He wasn't coming home for holidays like we used to. He wasn't talking to me about his plans for the future. He was just asking for money. I was his mother, yes. But I was starting to feel like I was nothing more than an ATM to him. I remember the first time I said no. I had been on the phone with him, trying to keep the conversation light, but there was that same request, money for rent. I didn't want to sound harsh, but something inside me snapped. John, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I've helped you so much, but I don't know if I can keep doing this. You need to learn how to manage your finances. I've always been here for you, but I need to know that you can handle things on your own. You're an adult now. There was silence on the other end of the line. I waited, my heart racing, wondering if I had made a mistake. Mom, I don't have time for this. I'll figure it out. Just send the money. The words hit me like a slap. There was no gratitude. No recognition of everything I had already done. Just an expectation that I would continue to give. I felt my heart sink. It was like a wall had come up between us, a wall built of indifference. I didn't say anything after that. I just sent the money. What else could I do? I didn't want to push him away, but at the same time, I was starting to resent how easily he took everything I had to offer without a second thought. I had given him everything, and he didn't seem to care. He was still my son, but he was becoming a stranger to me. A few weeks later, I got another call. This time, it wasn't just money for rent. It was something else. Mom, I need some cash to cover a car repair, he said. I could hear the same tone in his voice, the tone that said he knew I would give it to him. And once again, I did. No questions asked. But it was different this time. I could feel something in my chest tightening as I sent the money. It wasn't the usual sense of, I'm helping my son. It was the feeling of being used, like I had become a resource to him rather than a mother. He wasn't calling me because he missed me or wanted to talk to me. He wasn't asking for advice or sharing a joke. He was only calling when he needed something. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I didn't know when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, John had stopped seeing me as his mother. I had become a tool to him, a tool to fix his problems, a tool to pay for his life. The requests became more frequent, more insistent. Mom, I'm really short on cash. Can you send some? I need money for my textbooks. I've already maxed out my credit card. I kept sending it. I couldn't say no. I didn't know how to. But then came a day when I was sitting in the kitchen, preparing dinner, and I realized something. I had become someone's emergency fund. That's all I was now. I wasn't the person he turned to for advice anymore. I wasn't the person he called when he had something exciting to share. I wasn't even the person he visited during the holidays. No, I was the bank. The ATM. And that was all I was ever going to be to him. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just kept giving. I was trapped in this cycle, and I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to stop giving him everything without receiving anything in return. One day, I sat down and thought about everything I had done for him. All the years I had spent pouring love into him, all the sleepless nights I had spent making sure he was taken care of, all the sacrifices I had made to ensure his happiness. And now, he was calling only when he needed something. Not once had he called just to check in on me. Not once had he asked how I was doing or how my day had gone. He didn't need me for anything but money. And that hurt more than anything else. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the emotional toll it had taken on me. I felt like I had been drained, left empty. I had given him everything I had, and in return, I got nothing. Not even a thank you. Not even a moment where he could say, I appreciate you, Mom. I had given my whole life to this child. And now, all I had left was regret. Regret for not saying no sooner. Regret for not demanding that he care for me the way I had always cared for him. Regret for allowing myself to be used. The pain started as a dull ache, nothing too alarming at first. I thought it was just a cold, something that would pass in a few days. But the days dragged on, and the discomfort grew. My body felt heavy, as though I was carrying the weight of something I couldn't shake off. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just fatigue from everything. I had always prided myself on being strong, the kind of mother who could handle anything. But now, lying in bed, I felt helpless, weak in a way I never had before. I didn't want to worry John. He was already busy with his life, his own struggles. I didn't want to be a burden to him. After all, I had raised him to be independent, to not need me the way he used to. I told myself I could get through it, that I would feel better in a few days. But it wasn't getting better. It was getting worse. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, the dizziness hit. My knees buckled, and I collapsed onto the kitchen floor. I couldn't catch my breath. I felt like the walls were closing in around me. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I couldn't let this be the end. I couldn't let it be like this. I needed John. I dialed his number with trembling fingers. It rang for what felt like an eternity before he picked up. His voice was distant, not the warm, familiar voice I had once heard so often. It sounded colder now, more detached. "Mom," he answered, his voice strained, as if he had been distracted. "What's going on?" I need you," I whispered, barely able to speak. "I don't feel well, John. I can't do this alone. Please, come home." There was a long silence. I could hear him on the other end, breathing, but no response came right away. It felt like he was processing what I had said, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe he would drop everything, rush to my side, and take care of me. Maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment when everything shifted back to the way it was. But instead, his voice came through, flat and distant. "Mom, I really can't come right now. I have a lot of things going on. You'll be fine, okay? Just rest. I'll check in with you later." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart sank, and the weight of his words crashed down on me. I wanted to scream, to ask him how he could be so cold, so indifferent. But I didn't. I just sat there, holding the phone, numb. I didn't even say goodbye. He had already hung up. I lay on the kitchen floor, my body too weak to get up, my chest tight from both the illness and the heartache. How could he do this? How could he just brush me aside when I needed him most? I had given him everything, my love, my time, my sacrifices, and this was the result. A cold, impersonal response. He didn't even ask how I was feeling, didn't offer to help. All I got was, "You'll be fine," and the phone disconnecting. The days that followed were a blur of sickness and despair. I could barely get out of bed. My body was so drained, and my thoughts were clouded with the overwhelming sense of being abandoned. I kept telling myself that I shouldn't be angry, that I should understand. John had his own life now. He was busy. But the truth was, I needed him. I had always been there for him. And now, when I needed him most, he wasn't there for me. He didn't call again. Not once. Not to ask how I was doing, not to check in. I sent him a text, asking him to come home, to at least visit. But the reply I got back was worse than the silence. "Mom, you're fine. You've got this. Stop worrying about it." That was it. Those words, so simple, so cold, cut deeper than I could explain. I had spent my life giving everything to him, believing that one day, he would understand. That one day, when I needed him, he would be there for me, just like I had always been there for him. But now, I was left with nothing but a few short words and a deep, aching emptiness. I spent the next few days lying in bed, my body weak, my heart breaking. The loneliness in that room was unbearable. I kept thinking back to all the times I had been there for John, all the moments I had sacrificed for him. The late nights, the long hours, the love I had poured into him. And now, it was like none of it mattered. I thought about the years I had spent raising him, all the times I put him first. I had sacrificed my own happiness, my own well-being, because I believed it was my job as a mother to give everything to him. And yet, when I needed him, he had abandoned me without a second thought. The worst part was that I couldn't even be angry with him. I still loved him, deeply, unconditionally. But the love I had given him had been returned with indifference. And that was what hurt the most. I had given him everything, and in return, I had nothing. I tried to convince myself that he was just busy, that he didn't realize how bad things were. But deep down, I knew. I knew that this wasn't just about him being too busy. It was about something deeper. It was about a son who had stopped seeing me as his mother, who had stopped seeing me as someone who needed love and care, not just someone to give. He hadn't even asked about my health. No, it was just a quick message, a cold reply. I had been reduced to nothing more than an inconvenience to him. And as the days passed, I realized that I was truly alone. John had moved on with his life, and I had become a ghost in his world. He only reached out when he needed something, and when I needed him, he was nowhere to be found. The pain in my chest wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional. I had given him everything, but now, he was a stranger to me. The boy I had raised, the son I had loved, had become someone who didn't need me anymore. And that realization, that truth, was more painful than anything I had ever felt. Days bled into weeks, and the silence grew more suffocating. My phone didn't ring, and when it did, it was only for one thing: money. It wasn't a call to check on me, to ask how I was doing, or even a simple, "How are you, Mom?" No, it was always the same: "Mom, I need money for rent," or "Can you help with this?" And as much as it pained me, I gave. I sent the money without question. Because he was my son, and I had always been there for him. I had always given him everything I could, even when I had nothing left to give. But this time, the hurt was different. The more he called, the more I realized that I was nothing more than a resource to him. He only reached out when he needed something. The moments we shared, the hugs, the talks, the connection, were slowly fading away. I could feel it slipping through my fingers like sand. He had become so distant, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring him back. I couldn't even get him to check on me. He didn't care how I was doing, what I was going through. The last time I had been sick, I had reached out to him, but his response was cold and detached. "You'll be fine, Mom. I have to go." That was the last time I had heard anything from him. The phone call, the text, it all felt like a formality. He didn't need me. He just needed my help when things got tough. And when I needed him, he was nowhere to be found. But I kept giving. I didn't know how to say no. I couldn't stop myself from being the mother who always tried to fix everything, even if it meant I had nothing left for myself. Every time he called, I told myself that I was doing the right thing. That this was what a mother did. But in the back of my mind, I knew the truth. I wasn't a mother anymore, I was just a bank. I remember the first time I truly realized what had happened. He had called again, needing money for yet another bill. As always, I sent it without hesitation. But this time, after the transaction was done, something inside me broke. The reality hit me. This wasn't about love anymore. This was just a transaction. I had poured my heart into him, my soul, and this was what I got in return: another request, another cold message, another absence. But the final blow came one day when I received a text from John. It was the same as always, a simple, "I need money." But this time, he wasn't coming to visit. He wasn't checking in. He was just demanding. I didn't even want to respond. But I did. I always did. And that's when I realized how much I had been fooling myself. I had convinced myself that he would change, that one day he would come back to me, that he would see everything I had done for him. But he didn't. And he wasn't going to. He had moved on, and I had been left behind. The cycle repeated itself. John would call, ask for money, and I would give. But the pain didn't stop. With every transaction, I felt more and more invisible. He was living his life, and I was just a shadow in it. And the worst part was that I let it happen. I let myself be used. I had allowed him to take everything I had to give without ever once stopping to ask how I was doing. The more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. How had I allowed this? How had I spent years, all my time, giving him everything, only to be left with nothing? Every piece of myself that I had given to him, every sacrifice, had been for nothing. John never saw it. He never even acknowledged it. The phone calls continued, the messages kept coming, each one colder than the last. He wasn't coming home for the holidays. He wasn't checking in on me. But he still needed my help. It was like he had forgotten that I was a person with feelings, with needs of my own. To him, I was just a lifeline. And that was all I would ever be. The days dragged on, each one feeling heavier than the last. I spent most of my time waiting for John to call, waiting for him to check in on me. But the silence between us deepened. The only time my phone buzzed was when he needed something, money for rent, for bills, for some unexpected expense. It was always the same, a demand with no conversation attached, no inquiries about my well-being. I could no longer remember the last time he had asked how I was doing, or if I needed anything. It was always about him, his struggles, his problems, and I just kept giving. Because he was my son, and I loved him. But the truth kept eating at me. I was nothing more than a resource to him. I had spent my life raising him, loving him, sacrificing my own happiness to make sure he had everything he needed. And now, I was just someone he called when it was convenient. When he needed money, when things were tight, when he couldn't find another way out. And it hurt. I had hoped, foolishly, that if I kept giving, kept loving, he would eventually come back to me in the way that I needed. But that day never came. The more I gave, the more it felt like he drifted further away, like I was just a part of his past that he no longer had any use for. I kept holding on to the hope that one day, he would realize what I had done for him. That one day, he would come to me with appreciation, with love, with an understanding of the sacrifices I had made. But that day never came either. It wasn't until another message came through that I could no longer ignore the reality. Mom, I need money for rent this month. Can you send me $500? The request was short, impersonal, as if he thought I owed him something. No, how are you? No, I miss you. Just a simple demand, like a routine transaction. And that's when it hit me. I had been enabling him. Every time he called, I gave. Every time he needed something, I sacrificed. But nothing ever came back in return. Not love, not care, not even a simple check-in. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hand hovering over the phone. I wanted to say no. I wanted to stand up for myself for once, to stop enabling this cycle. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop myself from sending him the money, because he was my son, and I loved him. The thought of him struggling, of not being able to help him, was too much for me to bear. So, I sent the money, just like I always did, and felt that same knot in my stomach tighten. A few days later, John texted me again, telling me he would be in town for a few hours. I'll stop by and grab something I left at your place, he wrote. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe he was coming to see me, to reconnect. I spent the day preparing dinner, trying to keep my expectations in check, but secretly hoping for something, anything, that would show me that he still cared. When he arrived, it was everything I had feared it would be. He barely looked at me as he walked in, his attention focused on his phone. He barely acknowledged my presence. I tried to start a conversation, ask about his life, but his responses were short, distracted. He barely touched the food I had prepared for him. I sat there, silently watching as he ate, feeling the distance between us grow wider with each passing moment. After he finished, he got up quickly, saying, "I've got to go. I'll see you later." No hug, no, "I love you," just a quick exit as if he was in a hurry to get back to his life, his world, a life where I no longer seemed to fit. I sat there, stunned, as he left. It felt like the last thread that connected us had snapped. I had been hoping for a moment of connection, of love, but instead, I had received a cold, indifferent visit that left me feeling more alone than ever. The silence after he left was deafening. The house felt emptier than it ever had before. I thought back to when he was younger, when he needed me for everything. I had been his world, his source of comfort and support. But now, I was nothing. I wasn't his mother anymore, I was just someone to be used when it was convenient for him. And I realized then, with a crushing weight, that I had spent my life giving everything to a son who had moved on without me. The sacrifices I had made for him, the years I had spent raising him, had amounted to nothing. I had loved him with all my heart, but he didn't need that love. He had built his own life, and I was no longer a part of it. The realization hurt in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the money, it was everything. It was the emotional toll of giving so much of myself to someone who would never give anything back. It was the loneliness, the emptiness that had begun to fill the space he once occupied in my heart. And I knew, deep down, that nothing would ever change. John would never see me for who I was anymore. I wasn't his mother in his eyes. I was just someone who could help him when he was in need, someone who would always be there to give, but never to receive. I had tried for so long to hold on to the hope that one day he would come back to me, that one day he would realize what I had done for him. But he never would. And I had to accept that. The hardest part was knowing that I had been living in a fantasy. I had told myself that if I just gave enough, loved enough, he would return the love one day. But he never did. He had moved on, and I was stuck in the past, holding on to a relationship that no longer existed. And now, as I sat alone in the silence of my house, I realized that I had nothing left to give. I had given him everything, and in return, I had been left with nothing but the painful truth that I was no longer needed. I had been a mother who loved too much, but in the end, that love had meant nothing. The house felt quieter than ever. I had spent so many years filled with hope, love, and expectations, but now all of it seemed to slip away, leaving me with nothing but silence and regret. My phone never rang unless it was John needing something again. "No, how are you, Mom?" "No, I love you." Just requests, always the same, and each time, I gave, hoping that maybe this time he'd come to me with something else. But that never happened. I couldn't keep doing this. I had spent my life giving everything I had to him, but every time I gave, I was left feeling emptier. I loved him with every part of me, but he had stopped loving me back the way I needed him to. He had moved on, and I had been left behind, trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. For so long, I convinced myself that if I kept giving, if I kept loving, one day he would realize how much I had done for him. One day, he would come back to me, would see the sacrifices, and would return the love. But I finally had to face the truth. He wasn't coming back to me. The bond one had thought we shared was broken, and no amount of hoping or wishing would fix it. The final straw came when John texted me, asking for money, again. I couldn't even be angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of being the person he reached out to when he needed something, tired of always being the one who gave. I stared at the screen, but this time, I didn't send the money. I just let the message sit there. And I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about love anymore. It was about the fact that I had allowed myself to become invisible in my own son's life. A few days later, John called, saying he was in town for a few hours. I tried not to get my hopes up. I had done that too many times before. When he came over, it was the same as always. He barely looked at me when he walked in. His attention was consumed by his phone. He didn't ask how I was doing, how I had been feeling. He barely spoke, just ate the food I had made and left. When he stood up to leave, he didn't even hug me. There was no, "I love you," no words of affection. Just a brief, "I have to go." And just like that, he was gone. I watched him leave, and the truth hit me. He didn't need me. He didn't want me in his life the way I had always hoped. I was just a figure from his past, someone he turned to when he needed something. But when he was fine, when things were going well, I didn't exist to him. I realized, in that moment, that I had been living in the past. I had been holding on to a version of him that was long gone. He had moved on. And I had to let go. I had to stop hoping for a change that wasn't going to come. It wasn't easy. I had spent so many years dreaming of a different future, a future where John and I would be close, where he would appreciate all I had done for him. But now, that dream was shattered. John had moved on, and I had to do the same. I had loved him with everything I had. I had given him all of me. But in the end, it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. And the hardest part was accepting that. I had been living for him, but now, I had to start living for myself. The pain didn't just go away, and the hurt didn't fade immediately. But I knew it was time to let go. Time to stop holding on to the hope that John would come back to me, that he would see the love I had poured into him, and realize how much I had sacrificed. It wasn't going to happen. He had his life, and I had mine. It was time for me to move forward. I couldn't keep looking back anymore. I had to accept the reality of who John had become, and what our relationship had turned into. The son I had raised, the son I had loved, was no longer the person I thought he was. And I had to learn to live without him in the way I had always hoped. I sat in the quiet house, the silence now a companion that I had no choice but to accept. John had moved on. And so, I had to. The pain of loving someone who no longer loved you back was unbearable, but in that pain, I found the strength to let go.